Into the chaotic galactic political scene of the post-Concordiate era, the CDT emerged to carry forward the ancient diplomatic tradition as a great supranational organization dedicated to the contravention of war. Footnote. Cf. the original colorful language. Maintenance of a state of tension short of actual conflict. See CDT file 178/B/491 and column 7, spool 12, 745 millimeters, code 2G. Back to the header. As mediators of disputes among terrestrial settled worlds and advocates of terrestrial interests in contacts with alien cultures, core diplomats, trained in the chanceries of innumerable defunct bureaucracies, displayed an encyclopedic grasp of the nuances of extraterrestrial mores, as set against the labyrinthine socio-political, economic galactic context. Never was the virtuosity of a senior corps diplomat more brilliantly displayed than in Ambassador Spradley's negotiation of the awkward Serenian question. Extract from the Official History of the Corps Diplomatique, Volume 1, Reel 2, Solarian Press, New York, 479 AE, or AD 2940. Protocol. In the gloom of the squat, mud-colored reception building, the counselor, 2 first secretaries, and the senior attachés gathered around the plump figure of Ambassador Spradley, their ornate diplomatic uniforms bright in the vast, gloomy room. The ambassador glanced at his finger watch impatiently. "Ben, are you quite certain our arrival time was made clear?" Second Secretary Magnan nodded emphatically. "I stressed the point, Mr. Ambassador. I communicated with Mr. Takaikai just before the lighter broke orbit, and I specifically emphasized—" "I hope you didn't appear truculent, Mr. Magnan," the ambassador cut in sharply. "No, indeed, Mr. Ambassador. I merely—" "You sure there's no VIP room here?" The ambassador glanced around the cavernous room. "Curious that not even chairs have been provided." "If you'd care to sit on one of those crates, I'll use my hanky—" "Certainly not." The ambassador looked at his watch again and cleared his throat. "I may as well make use of these few moments to outline our approach for the more junior members of the staff. It's vital that the entire mission work in harmony in the presentation of the image. We terrestrials are a kindly, peace-loving race." The ambassador smiled in a kindly, peace-loving way. "We seek only reasonable division of spheres of influence with the Yill." He spread his hands, looking reasonable. "We are a people of high culture, ethical, sincere." The smile was replaced abruptly by pursed lips. "We'll start by asking for the entire Serenian system and settle for half. We'll establish a foothold on all the choicer worlds, and, with shrewd handling in a decade, we'll be in a position to assert a wider claim." The ambassador glanced around. "If there are no questions—" James Retief, vice-consul and third secretary in the Corps Diplomatique, and junior member of the terrestrial embassy to Yill, stepped forward. "Since we hold the prior claim to the system, why don't we put all our cards on the table to start with? Perhaps if we dealt frankly with the Yill, it would pay us in the long run." Ambassador Spradley blinked up at the younger man. Beside him, Magnan cleared his throat in the silence. "Vice-Consul Retief merely means—" "I'm capable of interpreting Mr. Retief's remark," Spradley snapped. He assumed a fatherly expression. "Young man, you're new to the service. You haven't yet learned the team play, the give and take of diplomacy. I shall expect you to observe closely the work of the experienced negotiators of the mission. Learn the importance of subtlety. Excessive reliance on direct methods might tend, in time, to attenuate the role of the professional diplomat. I shudder to contemplate the consequences." Spradley turned back to his senior staff members. Retief strolled across to a glass-paneled door and glanced into the room beyond. Several dozen tall, gray-skinned Yill lounged in deep couches, sipping lavender drinks from slender glass tubes. Black-tunic servants moved about inconspicuously, offering trays. Retief watched as a party of brightly dressed Yill moved toward a wide entrance door. One of the party, a tall male, made to step before another, who raised a hand languidly, fist clenched. The first Yill stepped back and placed his hands on top of his head with a nod. Both Yill continued to smile and chatter as they passed through the door. Retief rejoined the terrestrial delegation, grouped around a mound of rough crates stacked on the bare concrete floor, as a small leather-skinned Yill came up. "I am Pitoy. Come this way," he motioned. The terrestrials moved off, Ambassador Spradley in the lead. As the portly diplomat reached the door, the Yill guide darted ahead, shouldering him aside, then hesitated, waiting. The ambassador almost glared, then remembered the image. He smiled, beckoning the Yill ahead. The Yill muttered in the native language, stared about, then passed through the door. The Terran party followed. "I'd like to know what that fellow was saying," Magnan said, overtaking the ambassador. "The way he jostled your excellency was disgraceful." A number of Yill waited on the pavement outside the building. As Spradley approached the luxurious open car, waiting at the curb, they closed ranks, blocking his way. He drew himself up, opened his mouth, then closed it with a snap. "The very idea," Magnan said, trotting at Spradley's heels as he stalked back to rejoin the staff, now looking around uncertainly. "One would think these persons weren't aware of the courtesies due to a chief of mission." "They're not aware of the courtesies due an apprentice sloat-skinner," Spradley snapped. Around the terrestrials, the Yill milled nervously, muttering in the native tongue. "Where has our confounded interpreter betaken himself?" the ambassador barked. "I dare say they're plotting openly." "A pity we have to rely on a native interpreter." "Had I known we'd meet this rather uncouth reception," the ambassador said stiffly, "I would have audited the language personally, of course, during the voyage out." "Oh, no criticism intended, of course, Mr. Ambassador," Magnan said hastily. "Heavens, who would have thought?" Retief stepped up beside the ambassador. "Mr. Ambassador," he said, "Later, young man," the ambassador snapped. He beckoned to the counselor, and the two moved off, heads together. A bluish sun gleamed in a dark sky. Retief watched his breath form a frosty cloud in the chill air. A broad, hard-wheeled vehicle pulled up to the platform. The Yill gestured the Terran party to the gaping door at the rear, then stood back, waiting. Retief looked curiously at the gray-painted van. The legend, written on its side in alien symbols, seemed to read Eggnog. Unfortunately, he hadn't had time to learn the script too on the trip out. Perhaps later he would have a chance to tell the ambassador he could interpret for the mission. The ambassador entered the vehicle, the other terrestrials following. It was as bare of seats as the terminal building. What appeared to be a defunct electronic chassis lay in the center of the floor amidst a litter of paper and a purple and yellow sock designed for a broad Yill foot. Retief glanced back. The Yill were talking excitedly. None of them entered the car. The door was closed, and the Terrans braced themselves under the low roof as the engine started up with a whine of worn turbos, and the van moved off. It was an uncomfortable ride. The unsprung wheels hammered uneven cobblestones. Retief put out an arm as the vehicle rounded a corner, caught the ambassador as he staggered off balance. The ambassador glared at him, settled his heavy tri-corner hat, and stood stiffly until the car lurched again. Retief stooped, trying to see out through the single dusty window. They seemed to be in a wide street lined with low buildings. They passed through a massive gate, up a ramp, and stopped. The door opened. Retief looked out at a blank gray facade, broken by tiny windows at irregular intervals. A scarlet vehicle was drawn up ahead, the Yill reception committee emerging from it. Through its wide windows, Retief saw rich upholstery and caught a glimpse of glasses clamped to a tiny bar. Patoy, the Yill interpreter, came forward, gesturing to a small door in the grey wall. Magnan scurried ahead to open it and held it open for the ambassador. As he stepped to it, a Yill thrust himself ahead and hesitated. Ambassador Spradley drew himself up, glaring. Then he twisted his mouth into a frozen smile and stepped aside. The Yill looked toward each other, then filed through the door. Retief was the last to enter. As he stepped inside, a black-clad servant slipped past him, pulled the lid from a large box by the door, and dropped in a paper tray heaped with refuse. There were alien symbols in flaking paint on the box. They seemed, Retief noticed, to spell eggnog. The shrill pipes and whining reeds had been warming up for an hour when Retief emerged from his cubicle and descended the stairs to the banquet hall. Standing by the open doors, he lit a slender cigar and watched through narrowed eyes as obsequious servants in black flitted along the low, wide corridor, carrying laden trays into the broad room, arranging settings on a great four-sided table, forming a hollow square that almost filled the room. Rich brocades were spread across the center of the side nearest the door, flanked by heavily decorated white cloths. Beyond, plain white extended down the two sides to the far board, where metal dishes were arranged on the bare tabletop. A richly dressed Yill approached, stepped aside to allow a servant to pass, and entered the room. Retief turned at the sound of Terran voices behind him. The ambassador came up, trailed by two diplomats. He glanced at Retief, adjusted his ruff, and looked into the banquet hall. "Apparently we're to be kept waiting again," he snapped. "After having been informed at the outset that the Yill have no intention of yielding an inch, one almost wonders—" "Mr. Ambassador," Retief said, "have you noticed—" "However," Ambassador Spradley said, eyeing Retief, "a seasoned diplomat must take these little snubs in stride. In the end— there, Magnan." He turned away, talking. Somewhere a gong clanged. In a moment the corridor was filled with chattering Yill, who moved past the group of terrestrials into the banquet hall. Patoy, the Yill interpreter, came up, raised a hand. "Wait here." More Yill filed into the dining room, taking their places. A pair of helmeted guards approached and waved the terrestrials back. An immense grey-jowled Yill waddled to the doors, ropes of jewelry clashing softly, and passed through, followed by more guards. "The Chief of State," Retief heard Magnan say. "The Admirable Cow. "I have yet to present my credentials," Ambassador Spradley said. "One expects some latitude in the observances of protocol, but I confess—" He wagged his head. The Yill interpreter spoke up. "You now will lie on your intestines and creep to festive board here." He pointed across the room. "Intestines?" Ambassador Spradley looked about wildly. "Mr. Patoy means our stomachs, I wouldn't wonder," Magnan said. "He just wants us to lie down and crawl to our seats, Mr. Ambassador." "What the devil are you grinning at, you idiot?" the ambassador snapped. Magnan's face fell. Spradley glanced over at the medals across his paunch. I've never—" "Homage to gods," the interpreter said. Oh, religion," someone said. "Well, if it's a matter of religious beliefs—" The ambassador looked around dubiously. "Actually, it's only a couple of 100 feet, Magnan said. Retief stepped up to Patoy. "His Excellency, the terrestrial ambassador, will not crawl," he said clearly. "Here, young man, I said nothing—" "Not to crawl?" The interpreter wore an unreadable Yill expression. "It is against our religion," Retief said. "Against?" "We are votaries of the snake goddess," Retief said. "It is a sacrilege to crawl." He brushed past the interpreter and marched toward the distant table. The others followed. Puffing, the ambassador came to Retief's side as they approached the dozen empty stools on the far side of the square, opposite the brocaded position of the Admirable Cow. "Mr. Retief, kindly see me after this affair," he hissed. "In the meantime, I hope you will restrain any further rash impulses. Let me remind you, I am chief of mission here." Magnan came up from behind. "Let me add my congratulations, Retief," he said. "That was fast thinking." "Are you out of your mind, Magnan?" the ambassador barked. "I am extremely displeased." "Why," Magnan stuttered, "I was speaking sarcastically, of course, Mr. Ambassador. Naturally, I, too, was taken aback by his presumption." The terrestrials took their places, Retief at the end. The table before them was of bare green wood, with an array of shallow pewter dishes upon it. The Yill at the table, some in plain grey, others in black, eyed them silently. There was a constant stir among them as one or another rose and disappeared, and others sat down. The pipes and reeds of the orchestra were shrilling furiously, and the susurration of Yillian conversation from the other tables rose ever higher in competition. A tall Yill in black was at the ambassador's side now. The nearby Yill all fell silent as the servant ladled a whitish soup into the largest of the bowls before the terrestrial envoy. The interpreter hovered, watching. "That's quite enough," Ambassador Spradley said as the bowl overflowed. The Yill servant dribbled more of the soup into the bowl. It welled out across the tabletop. "Kindly serve the other members of my staff," the ambassador commanded. The interpreter said something in a low voice. The servant moved hesitantly to the next stool and ladled more soup. Retief watched, listening to the whispers around him. The Yill at the table were craning now to watch. The servant was ladling the soup rapidly, rolling his eyes sideways. He came to Retief and reached out with the full ladle for the bowl. "No," Retief said. The servant hesitated. "None for me," Retief said. The interpreter came up, motioning to the servant, who reached again, ladle brimming. "I don't want any," Retief said, his voice distinct in the sudden hush. He stared at the interpreter, who stared back for a moment, then waved the servant away and moved on. "Mr. Retief!" a voice hissed. Retief looked down the table. The ambassador was leaning forward, glaring at him, his face a mottled crimson. "I'm warning you, Mr. Retief," he said hoarsely. "I've eaten sheep's eyes in the Sudan, Kasway in Burma, 100-year Kug on Mars, and everything else that has been placed before me in the course of my diplomatic career, and by the holy relics of St. Ignatz, you'll do the same." He snatched up a spoon-like utensil and dipped it into his bowl. "Don't eat that, Mr. Ambassador," Retief said. The ambassador stared, eyes wide. He opened his mouth, guiding the spoon toward it. Retief stood, gripped the table under its edge, and heaved. The immense wooden slab rose and tilted. Dishes crashed to the floor. The table followed with a ponderous slam. Milky soup splattered over the terrazzo. A couple of odd bowls rolled clattering across the room. Cries rang out from the Yill, mingling with a strangled yell from Ambassador Spradley. Retief walked past the wild-eyed members of the mission to the sputtering chief. "Mr. Ambassador," he said, "I'd like—" "You'd like? I'll break you, you young hoodlum! Do you realize—" "Please." The interpreter stood at Retief's side. My apologies," Ambassador Spradley said, mopping his forehead. "My profound—" "Be quiet," Retief said. "What?" "Don't apologize," Retief said. Batoy was beckoning. "Please, I'll come." Retief turned and followed him. The portion of the table they were ushered to was covered with an embroidered white cloth, set with thin porcelain dishes. The Yill already seated there rose amid babbling, and moved down to make room for the terrestrials. The black-clad Yill at the end table closed ranks to fill the vacant seats. Retief sat down, finding Magnan at his side. "What's going on here?" the second secretary said. "They were giving us dog food," Retief said. "I overheard a Yill. They seated us at the servants' section of the table." "You mean you understand the language?" "I learned it on the way out. Enough, at least." The music burst out with a clangorous fanfare, and a throng of jugglers, dancers, and acrobats poured into the center of the hollow square, frantically juggling, dancing, and backflipping. Servants swarmed, heaping mounds of fragrant food on the plates of Yill and terrestrials alike, pouring pale purple liquor into slender glasses. Retief sampled the Yill food. It was delicious. Conversation was impossible in the din. He watched the gaudy display and ate heartily. Retief leaned back, grateful for the lull in the music. The last of the dishes were whisked away, and more glasses filled. The exhausted entertainers stopped to pick up the thick square coins the diners threw. Retief sighed. It had been a rare feast. "Retief," Magnan said in the comparative quiet, "what were you saying about dog food as the music came up?" Retief looked at him. "Haven't you noticed the pattern, Mr. Magnan? The series of deliberate affronts?" "Deliberate affronts? Just a minute, Retief. They're uncouth, yes, crowding into doorways and that sort of thing, but—" He looked at Retief uncertainly. "They herded us into a baggage warehouse at the terminal. Then they hauled us here in a garbage truck." "Garbage truck?" "Only symbolic, of course. They ushered us in the tradesman's entrance, and assigned us cubicles in the servants' wing. Then we were seated with the coolie-class sweepers at the bottom of the table." You must be mistaken. I mean, after all, we're the terrestrial delegation. Surely these Yill must realize our power." "Precisely, Mr. Magnan. But—" With a clang of cymbals, the musicians launched a renewed assault. 6 tall, helmeted Yill sprang into the center of the floor, paired off in a wild performance, half dance, half combat. Magnan pulled at Retief's sleeve, his mouth moving. Retief shook his head. No one could talk against a Yill orchestra in full cry. Retief sampled a bright red wine and watched the show. There was a flurry of action, and 2 of the dancers stumbled and collapsed, their partner opponents whirling away to pair off again, described the elaborate pre-combat ritual, and abruptly set to, dulled sabers clashing, and 2 more Yill were down, stunned. It was a violent dance. Retief watched, the drink forgotten. The last 2 Yill approached and retreated, whirled, bobbed, and spun, feinted, and postured, and then one was slipping, going down, helmet awry, and the other, a giant, muscular Yill, spun away, whirled in a mad skirl of pipes as coins showered, then froze before a gaudy table, raised the saber, and slammed it down in a resounding blow across the gay cloth before a lace and bow-bedecked Yill. The music stopped with a ringing clash of cymbals. In utter silence, the dancer-fighter stared across the table. With a shout, the seated Yill leaped up and raised a clenched fist. The dancer bowed his head, spread his hands on his helmet, and resumed his dance, as the music blared anew. The beribboned Yill waved a hand negligently, flung a handful of coins across the floor, and sat down. Now the dancer stood rigid before the brocaded table, and the music chopped off short as the saber slammed down before a heavy Yill in ornate metallic coils. The challenged Yill rose, raised a fist, and the other ducked his head, putting his hands on his helmet. Coins rolled, and the dancer moved on. He circled the broad floor, saber twirling, arms darting in an intricate symbolism. Then suddenly he was towering before Retief, saber above his head. The music cut, and in the startling, instantaneous silence, the heavy saber whipped over and down with an explosive concussion that set dishes dancing on the tabletop. The Yill's eyes held on Retief's. In the silence, Magnan tittered drunkenly. Retief pushed back his stool. "Steady, my boy," Ambassador Spradley called. Retief stood, the Yill topping his 6'3" by an inch. In a motion too quick to follow, Retief reached for the saber, twitched it from the Yill's grasp, swung it in a whistling arc. The Yill ducked, sprang back, and snatched up a saber dropped by another dancer. "Someone stop the madman!" Spradley howled. Retief leaped across the table, sending fragile dishes spinning. The other danced back, and only then did the orchestra spring to life with a screech and a mad tattoo of high-pitched drums. making no attempt to follow the weaving patter of the Yill bolero. Retief pressed the Yill, fending off vicious cuts with the blunt weapon, chopping back relentlessly. Left hand on hip, Retief matched blow for blow, driving the other back. Abruptly, the Yill abandoned the double roll. Dancing forgotten, he settled down in earnest, cutting, thrusting, parrying. Now the two stood toe-to-toe, sabers clashing in a lightning exchange. The Yill gave a step, two, then rallied, drove Retief back. Retief feinted, laid a hearty whack across the grey skull. The Yill stumbled, his saber clattered to the floor. Retief stepped aside as the Yill wavered past him and crashed to the floor. The orchestra fell silent in a descending wail of reeds. Retief drew a breath deep and wiped his forehead. "Come back here, you young fool!" Spradley called hoarsely. Retief hefted the saber, turned, eyed the brocade-draped table. He started across the floor. The Yill sat as if paralyzed. "Retief, no!" Spradley yelped. Retief walked directly to the admirable Cow, stopped, raised the saber. "Not the chief of state!" someone in the terrestrial mission groaned. Retief whipped the saber down. The dull blade split the heavy brocade and cleaved the hardwood table. There was utter silence. The admirable Cow rose, 7 feet of obese grey Yill, his broad face expressionless to the Terran eye. He raised a fist like a jewel-studded ham. Retief stood rigid for a long moment. Then, gracefully, he inclined his head and placed his fingertips on his temples. Behind him there was a clatter as Ambassador Spradley collapsed. Then the admirable Cow cried out, reached across the table to embrace the terrestrial, and the orchestra went mad. Grey hands helped Retief across the table. Stools were pushed aside to make room at Cow's side. Retief sat, took a tall flagon of coal-black brandy pressed on him by his neighbour, clashed glasses with the admirable, and drank. "The feast ends," Cow said. "Now you and I, Retief, must straddle the council stool." "I'll be honoured, your admirableness," Retief said. "I must inform my colleagues." "Colleagues?" Cow said. "It is for the chiefs to parley. Who shall speak for a king while he yet has tongue for talk?" "The Yill way is wise," Retief said. Cow emptied a squat tumbler of pink beer. "I'll treat with you, Retief, as viceroy, since, as you say, your king is old and the space between worlds is far. But there shall be no scheming underlings privy to our dealings." He grinned a Yill grin. "Afterwards we shall carouse, Retief. The council stool is hard, and the waiting handmaidens delectable. This makes for quick agreement." Retief smiled. "The admirable speaks wisdom." "Of course, a being prefers wenches of his own kind," Cow said. He belched. "The Ministry of Culture has imported several terrestrial joy girls, said to be top-notch specimens. At least they have very fat whatchamacallits." "Your admirableness is most considerate," Retief said. "Let us to it then, Retief. I may hazard a tumble with one of your terries myself. I fancy an occasional perversion." Cow dug an elbow into Retief's side and bellowed with laughter. As Retief crossed to the door at Cow's side, Ambassador Spradley glowered from behind the plain tablecloth. "Retief," he called, "kindly excuse yourself. I wish a word with you." His voice was icy. Magnan stood behind him, goggling. "Forgive my apparent rudeness, Mr. Ambassador," said Retief. "I don't have time to explain now." "Rudeness?" Spradley yipped. "Don't have time, eh? Let me tell you—" "Please lower your voice, Mr. Ambassador," Retief said. "The situation is still delicate." Spradley quivered, his mouth open. He found his voice. You... "Silence!" Retief snapped. Spradley looked up at Retief's face, stared for a moment into Retief's grey eyes. He closed his mouth and swallowed. "The Yill seem to have gotten the impression I'm in charge," Retief said. "We'll have to maintain the deception." But, Spradley stuttered. Then he straightened. "This is the last straw," he whispered hoarsely. "I am the terrestrial ambassador extraordinary and minister plenipotentiary. Magnan has told me that we've been studiedly and repeatedly insulted since the moment of our arrival, kept waiting in baggage rooms, transported in refuse lorries, herded about with servants, offered swill at the table. Now I and my senior staff are left cooling our heels without so much as an audience, while this multiple cow person hobnobs with Spradley's voice broke. "I may have been a trifle hasty, Retief, in attempting to restrain you. Slighting the native gods and dumping the banquet table are rather extreme measures, but your resentment was perhaps partially justified. I am prepared to be lenient with you." He fixed a choleric eye on Retief. "I am walking out of this meeting, Mr. Retief. I'll take no more of these personal—" "That's enough," Retief said sharply. "We're keeping the Admirable waiting." Spradley's face purpled. Magnan found his voice. "What are you going to do, Retief?" "I'm going to handle the negotiation," Retief said. He handed Magnan his empty glass. "Now go sit down and work on the image." At his desk in the VIP suite aboard the orbiting core vessel, Ambassador Spradley pursed his lips and looked severely at Vice-Consul Retief. "Further," he said, "you have displayed a complete lack of understanding of corps discipline, the respect due a senior officer, even the basic courtesies. Your aggravated displays of temper, ill-timed outbursts of violence, and almost incredible arrogance in the assumption of authority make your further retention as an officer agent of the Corps Diplomatique Terrestre impossible. It will therefore be my unhappy duty to recommend your immediate—" There was a muted buzz from the communicator. The ambassador cleared his throat. "Well?" "A signal from Sector HQ, Mr. Ambassador," a voice said. "Well, read it," Spradley snapped. "Skip the preliminaries. Congratulations on the unprecedented success of your mission. The Articles of Agreement transmitted by you embody a most favorable resolution of the difficult Sirenian situation, and will form the basis of continued amicable relations between the terrestrial states and the Yill Empire. To you and your staff, full credit is due for a job well done. Signed, Deputy Assistant Secretary Sternwheeler." Spradley cut off the voice impatiently. He shuffled papers, then eyed Retief sharply. "Superficially, of course, an uninitiated observer might leap to the conclusion that the results that were produced in spite of these irregularities justify the latter." The ambassador smiled with a sad, wise smile. "This is far from the case," he said. The communicator burped softly. "Confound it," Spradley muttered. "Yes?" "Mr. Kai has arrived," the voice said. "Shall I send him in?" "At once." Spradley glanced at Retief. "Only a two-syllable man, but I shall attempt to correct these false impressions, make some amends." The two terrestrials waited silently until the Yill protocol chief tapped at the door. "I hope," the ambassador said, "that you will resist the impulse to take advantage of your unusual position." He looked at the door. "Come in." Kai stepped into the room, glanced at Spradley, then turned to greet Retief in voluble Yill. He rounded the desk to the ambassador's chair, motioned him from it, and sat down. "I have a surprise for you, Retief," he said in Terran. "I myself have made use of the teaching machine you so kindly lent us." "That's good," Retief said. "I'm sure Mr. Spradley will be interested in hearing what we have to say." "Never mind," the Yill said. "I am here only socially." He looked around the room. "So plainly you decorate your chamber, but it has a certain austere charm." He laughed a Yill laugh. "Oh, you are a strange breed, you terrestrials. You surprised us all. You know, one hears such outlandish stories. I tell you in confidence, we had expected you to be overpushes." "Pushovers," Spradley said tonelessly. "Such restraint! What pleasure you gave to those of us like myself, of course, who appreciated your grasp of protocol. Such finesse! How subtly you appeared to ignore each overture, while neatly avoiding actual contamination. I can tell you, there were those who thought, poor fools, that you had no grasp of etiquette. How gratified we were, we professionals, who could appreciate your virtuosity, when you placed platters on a comfortable base matters on a comfortable basis by spurning the cat's meat. It was sheer pleasure, then, waiting to see what form your compliment would take. The Yill offered orange cigars, then stuffed one in his nostril. I confess even I had not hoped that you would honour our admiral so signally. Oh, it is a pleasure to deal with fellow professionals who understand the meaning of protocol. Ambassador Spradley made a choking sound. The fellow has caught a chill, Takakai said. He eyed Spradley dubiously. Step back, my man. I am highly susceptible. There is one bit of business I shall take pleasure in attending to, my dear Retief, Takakai went on. He drew a large paper from his reticule. His admirableness is determined that none other than yourself shall be accredited here. I have here my government's exchequer confirming you as terrestrial consul general to Yill. We shall look forward to your prompt return. Retief looked at Spradley. I'm sure the Corps will agree, he said. Then I shall be going, Takakai said. He stood up. Hurry back to us, Retief. There is much I would show you of the great empire of Yill. He winked a Yill wink. Together, Retief, we shall see many high and splendid things.